Please let me know. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, yes. A pleasant venue, no doubt. Okay, so this morning, 15 April, normally tax day. Tax day has been pushed back due to COVID, number of things going on. Today, we get a preview of coming attractions for your upcoming incident handling and acquisition tasks. Essentially, there's a certain mindset that's important to grasp. And one of the things that's really difficult about, and I kind of call this the walk on the tightrope, you're entrusted as a digital forensics professional to get into people's Kool-Aid. And that's a fine line. One of the most difficult things to do in all of this discipline is actually a formal task within acquisition. Can anybody recall from your previous assessments in the midterm what that's called? Anyone?
Can you repeat it one more time?
Okay. There's a separate stage within acquisition that's considered one of the most difficult tasks in all of forensics.
Extraction.
Extraction.
That's it. Yes. Thank you. Extraction. I knew you had it in there somewhere. Extraction requires an account of situational awareness, right? And it is a simple case that someone employed in an employer to render a product or service can be subject to examination or review at any time. Anything they use, anything they do, any place they work, anytime convenient for the employer. An end case, one of the most powerful forensic digital tool suites, wasn't long before they added features over the network. Now here's the rub. A lot of companies have a policy for their technology use called BYOD, bring your own device. What it means essentially is that the employer may or may not provide a stipend or like an allowance to assist an employee to purchase their own technology. But the technology belongs to the employee. It doesn't belong to the company. And the idea is this is a no fuss, no muss, environment where the company doesn't worry about having to replace lost or stolen laptops. They don't have to have all this overhead. There's personal buy-in, quite literally, on the part of each employee. This is catching on like wildfire because it saves lots of money at an organization. Think about it. It's like, okay, we have data, we have applications to do your work. You're expected to know those and to access that. But we aren't responsible for what you do to get there. That's on you. And there are a lot of companies that are adopting BYOD. As a technology professional of 20 years and somebody who's in the weeds with cyber, I can tell you it is a bad idea. I do not advocate BYOD under any circumstances for 99.9% of most organizations. But that's how it is. It's too popular and it saves too much money. And it's like a train that's leaving the station and nobody can stop it. Now here's where we get into trouble. From a distance, an employer can view employee screens and activities while using a company laptop in their home. Now, especially since COVID, we blur the lines between home and workplace. A virtual work environment often crosses boundaries, quite literally, right? So you have cases where there are company laptops used in the home environment on the home internet service. Is it the company's fault if somebody's infected device at their home infects the company laptop? Or is it the individual because somebody in their home had an infected, oh, somebody was surfing porn, somebody was downloading bootleg movies and they got something extra that hitched a ride and now everything's blown up, right? The whole idea of acceptable use starts to get to be a particular challenge when it comes to individual rights. And I want to call out the idea that it's not so easy or simple. And part of your task is to understand what you can and cannot do with these tools. You have to balance individual freedoms, the right to privacy, right? And the fact that an employer is involved, the employer does not own the employee. This is one problem that happens frequently. An employer gets frustrated, they say, I don't care, just figure out what's going on, right? While on the job, the employed is not entitled to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, or freedom to assemble. People think you're on my time, this is my dime, you're on the clock, you don't get those things. Then that's wrong. It is patently incorrect. It is unlawful to possess that attitude. Yet employers are driven to get productivity out of their workers. They have to, or they close their doors. It's not a simple picture. Neither is the employed protected against search and seizure, nor guaranteed privacy, nor the right to vote. Well, all right, so some employers are literally that. You know, some employees say this is not a democracy. No workplace is a democracy, where those who are paid get to tell those who pay them how a matter will be handled. And the simple truth is, I'm going to preach a little bit here. The simple truth is employers paying a lot of money, they think they have rights to. They believe they have rights, okay? And especially in larger Fortune 500 multinational corporations or even nonprofit, not-for-profit organizations, right? Huge not-for-profit. Things like the United Way or the Red Cross, right? Is it just that simple? It's not that simple, right? There's a thin line of reasoning that has cost employers serious losses from legal actions. And here's what we don't want. We don't want you in the crossfire. A mistaken notion that somehow the people who are employed and their work is somehow owned by an employer. That is not correct. In the state of South Carolina, they are terribly behind the times. South Carolina has a very primitive, even Cro-Magnon constitution compared to other states. But one thing they prevail is privacy rights. And in South Carolina, if you go fishing in somebody's private stuff in a BYOD environment, ooh, it's a bad day for you, right? It used to be very simple before the internet connected everything and everybody. But basically, hometown attorneys and even large corporate legal teams have found themselves in the sudden need of technical specialists. And this is where you come in, right? This is where you have to understand the situation, the situational awareness, and you have to set the stage properly. The best way to learn this is to do this. And the problem that we face here is that we're online, we have a virtual environment, so we have to create a scenario and a condition where the use of non-disclosure agreements and acceptable use policies, where the expectation of education and awareness and training has been properly documented for each hire, right? And in such a workplace environment that you'd also invest in systems logging, you'd have procedures, policies, and standards that are honored by employees. The problem is that some employees don't respect boundaries either. So they cross boundaries when it comes to their personal life. But here's something that's should make you stop and think. This is a hold the press, get off the phone, swallow hard, think about this. There is legal precedent known as e-discovery. It's when a court says, I don't care I want to see all the email. What was sent and received between anyone who had any dealings with this person. Email is like a spider's web. When you start pulling email that was sent, sometimes it's not in the sent items box, but it's in the other person's inbox. Now you have to go digging in the other person's inbox. It's like snagging the yarn on a sweater. An organization starts to unravel because everything that was thought to be private or confidential, a matter of personnel action that was supposed to be confidential. Well, now it's in front of everybody. E-discovery costs hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars. There are companies that were ordered by a court to cough up all the records. It cost them millions of dollars and they closed their doors. They went bankrupt. Not from the legal action, just from failing to comply with a court order. Serious business, right? It's something that everybody needs to understand. There are plenty of imperfect scenarios, and the reality is this is where a lot of digital forensic professionals crash on the rocks. They just don't have a sense for where this can go. Now, here is one example of something that requires a little bit of deft. It requires a light touch, but a skillful touch. And this is where our scenario for this module is going to come into play. Let's presume that we have a scenario. We're going to create a scenario situation. We're going to try to make it as close to the real world as possible. We're going to set the stage in a nonprofit organization. We're going to say that there's a disgruntled employee of the nonprofit organization. All right. And then we're going to take off running at that system, which is live and operating. It's going to be screen locked. The subject of the investigation is going to be out of town. The subject is away at a conference. They think somebody is on that screen remotely. Somebody is interacting with that screen live on that system remotely. That is a distinct violation of acceptable use policies and other policies. It is proof positive that there are other human resources policies in an organization that have been violated. Clearly, the very fact that it's happening and the way it's happening is proof that somebody has really screwed it up. Here are some things, 4 principles that a DEFR and DES should practice faithfully. Now, some of this is going to ring a bell. Some of this should be a review, but one, first and foremost, you know that the capacity to acquire and analyze the digital life of another human being is not an open license to do so without restriction. So when we're talking about acquisition, we're talking about the restraints or caveats that we want you to practice. In this scenario that we just discussed with a live screen, you still need to know the boundaries. And just because you can get on that system doesn't mean you have open license to do anything else with regard to that person on any of their stuff. You could have a supervisor that says, oh, she left her personal smartphone in the desk drawer. You need to get on that. We need to see what's on there. It's like, yeah, what if something unexpected is discovered during an investigation? How about a thumb drive? A USB drive stuck in the drive. The USB drive on the desktop that's running, that's being remotely accessed, that's live. You're not sure if somebody that's authorized to be on there is on there. You're not sure if it's somebody who's hacked the system, but you know there's a thumb drive. Is it the company's thumb drive? Is it the individual's thumb drive? Right? You have to expect the unexpected. What are we saying? Part of the situational awareness is the ability to keep a record of what's going on as it's happening. You have to be able to capture things that happen in a hurry. Screen captures are just part of that. you probably want some kind of digital camera or video recorder in addition to what you might be able to capture on the screen. And depending on the circumstance, how you capture a screen can also actively modify the running memory that's in RAM, because you're storing a screen image in RAM and that's displacing other memory. So you have to understand what you can and cannot do, right? Can you take a screenshot without actively compromising what's in active memory? The short answer is yes. And if you have an unexpected situation, can you quickly adjust in the scenario to achieve that screen capture in a manner that preserves the digital evidence? Familiarity breeds contempt. This is a killer right here. What if a forensic investigator is familiar with either an employee or employer to the extent that business is routinely conducted? A current or former friendship or family tie exists. In that case, you need to step off. This is one of those caveats of the situational awareness. If you happen to cross paths, you're like, oh, hey, Joe, I didn't know you worked here. Yeah, I got hired here 3 months ago. Oh, you work in this department? Oh, I wasn't aware you're an employee of this department. Oh, and who's your supervisor? See, a disinterested third party must conduct themselves as a what? Disinterested third party. If you investigate anyone who is other than just a passing acquaintance, you're no professional at all. Now, I need to say that again. If you're in the mix, you're doing something, and this boundary is crossed, you need to refer out to someone else. You need to say, you know what? I want the best outcomes for everyone here. And I know somebody here in the mix, and I can do this piece of it, but this other part, I have a colleague, I have an associate, I know of a credible third party. They can take care of that piece of it. Let me help you with this section. We need to, you call it out, right? It's one thing you have to do. It happens more often than you would think. It happens on the fly, spontaneously, in the middle of the process, and everything goes sideways. What if a DEFR or DES is the recipient of digital evidence that is emailed by an anonymous? Here's another thing that happens all the time. Oh, you have a third party. They're not disinterested, not in the least. They know why you're there. They're just waiting for tapes, you know. Maybe they're friendly. Maybe they're looking at you funny from a distance. But then suddenly in your inbox, it's like, here's something. Who is this from? Oh, they're going to help, right? The question is, what's their motive? How and why are they helping? Is that digital evidence relevant? Oh, you bet your bottom dollar. Yeah. You can bet your last penny. That digital evidence is certainly relevant. But it belies the fact, it is proof positive that there's another element in the mix that you may or may not have understood previously. It is time for pause and reflection. It is time to capture the record. It is time to work your due diligence. Digital evidence received should be acquired in a forensically sound manner. That means that you don't just take for granted the email came from this anonymous source. You have to check the header of the email after you get a screenshot. People could be bouncing an email through other systems. True story. I was once held captive in a building for an entire day. The building was the size of an entire city block. There were 1,200 of us. The Secret Service came down, clamped down the building, and shut down everything. The Secret Service descended because a graduate student in the computer engineering building at USC sent a threat to the President of the United States of America, a credible threat to the United States of America. Only they happened to relay that email through a half a dozen other systems before it bounced out to the whitehouse.gov site. So the Secret Service did what they knew to do in that case, and they locked everything and every one of us down until they could pick through it. It was painful. Here's something to consider. You're going to hash all digital records created, captured, stored. In this case, screenshot, email, header views, and email. Hash, 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 hash. And what do? Before you start hashing, validate what? Validate what? Come on, finish the phrase. Hello? Everybody with me? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Validate, verify, verification, certify, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what the phrase was.
Yeah. Last one, certify. Validate something and certify, right? Was it
I
authentic?
don't remember the second word, but I know it's validate and certify.
It's validate and certify. Come on, you got to tickle that memory. That's how you remember things better. We drudge it up, right? Okay, let's get into the specifics. Let's start the big show. I want to get on to the next thing, okay? I want to talk about the scenario, something fishy at AFES. So here's what's going to happen. We've created a scenario that we're going to try to, and the conditions that we're going to try to match as authentic to real life as possible. Sydney Corinth is a professional conservation advocate who began working at the Association for Endangered Species, AFES, on its 10th anniversary. As an international nonprofit organization, AFES must abide by certain ethical and legal standards. In particular, AFES has received U.S. federal funding to conduct studies and perform related conservation activities intended to promote the survival of all endangered species research, another word for that. After 3 years of work at AFES, co-workers have noted that Sydney reflects a very different countenance on the job, openly expressing negative perspectives and accusing peers of being, quote unquote, corporate sellouts. Some at AFES recall the change began last year when Sydney urged the organization to consider promotion of a special chapter for an endangered species of penguin. Chapters for other well-known species have cleared approvals quickly: snow leopards, tigers, red pandas, etc. However, Sydney had just broken off an office romance with the vice president at AFES, who then halted the approval of the penguin chapter. This had the added effect of restricting limited budgets for field trips to sites where surviving penguins could be studied in their natural habitat. To make matters worse, the VP recruited a corporate sponsor known to violate fishing quotas in the region where endangered penguins feed. Oh, horror of horrors. Okay. In recent months, colleagues have noticed that Sydney's productivity has declined dramatically. Though Sydney has been logging longer hours at night and on weekends, that's not good. When no one else is around, that's not good either. Ms. Corinth complained in recent weeks that the office workstation has been slow and crashes without warning. This week, the system has remained on while Sydney was away attending a conference in Rio de Janeiro. Over the last weekend, Sydney logged on remotely, though the airline reported a no-show for the return flight. So there's a gap. However, the hotel confirmed checkout as expected. Okay, so what's going on here? So she checks out of the hotel, but she didn't make the airline, and somebody is on the machine. Meanwhile, unusual log entries for the finance system AFES uses to receive donations and covering operating expenses. So we have money coming in and we have money going out. Oh no. Was reported by an external auditor conducting routine quarterly reviews of the AFES finances. Put another way, something called role-based access control was violated because the roles were excluded, should have been excluded, were not excluded. Somebody in the finance department could receive donations and write checks. That's a no-no according to generally acceptable accounting principles, the GAAP manual. It's called GAAP. Among the findings, any questions so far? Any questions so far?
None from me.
Among the findings was that Sydney had been designated as an agent to receive donations for a new fundraising interest and recently added to staff who can also disperse AFES funds. Ooh, so that role-based access control violation. On a technical side, also on the finance side, as far as operational practices, Sydney's in the middle of that. That's not good. And now she's AWOL. Sydney's logon has been used to receive anonymous donations and transfer payments to a nefarious business with a bank account in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Oh, the plot thickens. AFES practices and policies expressly prohibit this possibility, and no forms to allow Sydney such access were processed or documented. So how the heck did she get that access? Rather, it is clear that access on the system was granted by an administrator who has since sworn no privileges were granted to Sydney for either responsibility. Today, the system at Sydney's desk has been running hot with system fans blowing harder in a facility that remains a constant cool 70 degrees. You have been asked to conduct a forensically sound assessment of the office system Sydney uses, exercising appropriate discretion given your awareness of the situation. Your service contract requires you to perform a physical and digital acquisition, to conduct a formal analysis of the physical and digital evidence, and to provide a summary of findings per the scope of work. Except for a clear case that a felony has been, and this is really important, except for a clear case that a felony has been committed, you have also signed a binding disclosure agreement that prevents you from sharing specifics with anyone other than the AFES CEO, the Chief Financial Officer, and the Chief Information Officer. So the VP that was part of this before, right? The VP of interest here, the office romance. Yeah, you got to steer clear of that. The password, so I am going to pretend that I am your IT support. In this scenario, for your solution, I'm going to conveniently reset the password. For the active login has been discreetly changed to allow you, the specialist, to unlock the system for viewing of active applications and activities. Now, here's something really important. Did everybody see that word unlock? Everybody? Unlock?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You instantly fail the solution if you sign out of the screen you access. This is sudden death. You fail as a forensic specialist, you get 0 credit for the solution. Now, can you do it over again? Yeah, you can do it over again. You can start over from scratch. You can resubmit. Do you want to? No. When you access this remote system for your solution and for some of your assignments, you're going to have a couple of assignments related and you'll have a solution. One of the things you're going to do is you're going to use a VHD file, a 1 gigabyte VHD file, and simulate that it is a USB drive. More on that in just a minute. The other thing you're going to do is you're going to remotely access that screen, which is not, it's not signed out, right? Somebody's logged in. It's actually Sydney that's logged in. And the screen is locked because of a screensaver, right? And here you are, the digital forensic specialist. Now it's a habit, isn't it? When we clear the screen, what do? We sign out, right? Another thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take screenshots of what's going on actively on that system, the running applications, the windows that are open, and you're going to want to interact with that environment in a manner that is forensically sound, i.e., you are not changing the size of windows. You are not reorganizing things. You are only clicking up active. So if I click up here and I'm displaying what's already active in the window, I have not violated, I have not altered the running data. If I do this, I have. I've broken the rules. You are only to access running windows, get screenshots, and then, you know, if, let's say that, let's pretend, I want everybody to be clear about the expectations. Let's pretend that we had two screens that were open and they were here and here. When you sign on, you're unlocking the screen with a modified password that was properly changed to allow your services. When you see this screen, you're going to get a screenshot of this. Now, because you're doing it through a remote desktop connection, you are not on the screen physically yourself. If you resize the remote desktop screen and get a snapshot of that, you're only changing the memory on your local system. You are changing the contents of active RAM on your machine only, not on that machine. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? So when you finish, what are you going to do? You're going to return the screen to its original state. You're going to have a starting screen you take a snapshot of. You're going to check out the other windows that are running by clicking on them and getting a screenshot of each. You may even interact with tabs in a browser. If you have tabs that are loaded, you can click on each of the tabs, but you have to return to the active tab, right? And then when you're finished, you want to go back. You want to click on this little option down here. You want to minimize all windows, and then you want to click on the 2 or 3 items that were there so that you have returned to the same state you found it in. Your last screenshot is this, what you started with. You need to be able to do that because Sydney is going to check in. She may be on a break. She may be in traffic. When she gets back on her system, she's going to notice the password has changed. She's going to call the IT shop and say, hey, something's wrong. They're coordinating with the CIO who has authorized your access to that screen for forensic purposes. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? She's going to say, I need to get on my screen. The IT shop is going to say, we're doing some things for system maintenance. We can't get right on it, but give us about 15 minutes and we'll have your password changed. We'll call you back. Somebody in the IT, a trusted member of the CIO's staff, is handling that interaction with Sydney. Why? Because if Sydney is doing things with federal funds and has anything to do with being wired to a foreign country, it's a felony. And Sydney got access somehow with someone else in that organization, and they committed a felony, aiding and abetting a felon. So when they gave her access, they created one hell of a mess. You need to be able to find the goods so that the local human resources department can figure out, are we just taking a personnel action to separate Ms. Sydney from the organization? Or are we referring this matter to criminal law enforcement and we need to escalate and, oh yeah, we're going to need a search warrant because now we got to go further. Okay. Let's talk about the USB for a second. Any questions so far? Any questions? So what's the last thing you're going to do? You're going to return the screen to its original state, and you're not going to sign out. You are not going to log off or shut down. What you're going to do is issue the command to Control-Alt-Delete so that the blue screen shows and you're going to select lock. Okay. More on that in a bit. Let's look at this USB. This USB can be mounted, and when it is mounted, it can have the name like SanDisk or Kingston. What am I saying? For purposes of our activities, you're going to be given a VHD. And basically, inside a VHD, when it's connected or attached, it's very much like a thumb drive that's plugged in to a USB port. It's synonymous electronically, though not identical to an actual physical USB drive. Now let's repeat that. Synonymous doesn't mean the same as identical. Synonymous means it's similar in nature, close enough for government work. For the purposes of our simulation, we're going to simulate that you are in possession of a USB drive that is connected to that machine, okay? And at some point, you're allowed to collect that USB drive. Now, creating a VHD is as simple as selecting the system, right-clicking and choosing Manage, going to Disk Management, and then using an action item to create a VHD. Now, the cool part is that you can choose different sizes and formats. We're going to create something that's a little larger than 1024 megabytes. We want it to be about a gig large, and by the time the disk is finished being partitioned and formatted, it's going to be a little less than that. So we're going to try to come as painfully close to 1024 as possible. However, you know as well as I do, if you buy a 16 gig thumb drive and you plug it into your laptop, you don't exactly get 16 gigs. Okay, so for all intent and purposes, I'm just going to, I guess I will put in 1024. We're going to create a fixed size VHD, and inside of it is going to be all sorts of juicy digital evidence, some of it hidden, some of it in plain sight. You're going to need to see what's in plain sight to guide what it is you can carve out, because disks are very large. And as you're working your acquisition, what's the name of the most difficult phase of acquisition? Once again?
Extraction.
Extraction. When you're extracting data, you want to inform your decisions about what you're doing. I'm going to create a test VHD. And there are two ways to connect a disk. We know that forensically sound principles dictate that you have to connect a disk in a manner where write changes, data changes, or writes to the disk are impossible. If you don't connect to that disk in such a manner, you are forensically unsound and the evidence is inadmissible. You'll notice right here that I now have a 1 gig thumb drive. In the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and connect to the one. I'm going to attach this one. Everybody see the read-only? Does everybody see that read-only option, please? Does everybody see the read-only?
Yes.
Yes.
When you connect to the VHD, you must take a screenshot that you have enabled read-only when you connect the VHD. This will simulate, it is synonymous with capturing the contents of a USB disk in a forensically sound manner that precludes write back to the disk partition or volume. This is part of the artifact that you have to submit. This is critical, just like having a screenshot of what's supposed to be the same. Now, each one of you is going to interact. Now, here's the fun part. While each of you will have access to your very own VHD because you're going to download it and you'll have access to it on your system, you won't have access to the live system all to yourself. You're going to have a window just like you would in real life while Sydney is out to lunch, while Sydney is at a doctor's appointment, while Sydney is away at a conference and disconnected remotely. Or she's locked the screen and her session is disconnected, but as soon as she gets back on, she's going to want to unlock the system, right? You're going to have to do what you need to do on that live system. You have a 60-minute window to investigate everything. And in that 1 hour, you have to collect all of the artifacts that are expected in the rubric. Then you're going to do a separate scope of work on the USB, which when connected read-only is going to appear as though it is a thumb drive of the SanDisk brand. And you're going to see stuff in here that you may or may not already view because of the viewing options on your system. You're going to want to adjust your viewing options so that you can see hidden things. And then you're going to start your forensic work. You're going to use the Kali Linux tools on this thumb disk. You're actually going to extract the data outright, but you're going to create a digital copy. And the forensic work that you use, that you perform, will only be performed on the copy of the disk, not the actual disk. One of the things you have to be able to do to complete your solution for the next module, the analysis module, is to show me that the hash value you generated when you first acquired that USB disk is the exact same as the one you generate after analysis. If those two don't match, you basically directly accessed the original digital evidence instead of making an identical copy to work with. You always want to make an identical copy to work with. Okay, so that's it for now. Are there any questions about what we've presented in terms of the resources you'll engage, how you're going to use a VHD as a thumb drive that was picked up at the site, how you're going to engage a live machine to capture live evidence? Does anyone have any questions at this point in time about what we've shared?
No, sir.
When I disconnect this and I basically eject this, so now that it's connected, it's so much like a USB, I can actually eject it, just like a USB. Once it's ejected, I should be able to go back in here, look at my VHD, get a hash, and the hash should match the original hash. Okay. All right. So this concludes the session today. Thank you for the additional latitude at the beginning of the session to get some stuff pulled together. You will see some assignments related and the solution posted soon, along with the study guide. We're going to make quick work of this, and by next week, we'll be in the next module. So this is going to happen very quickly. I wish you a good weekend. Stay healthy. Keep your eyes peeled on the Blackboard screen. And I'll also have a YouTube video on how to connect to the subject machine that's running. Okay, what your login credentials will be. I'll ask you to sign out a particular 1 hour, 60-minute schedule. If you need another shot at it, you can have another shot, but we have to schedule it around other students. Every time a student changes their access on the screen, I have to go back in and make sure that it's restored to its original condition for the next student, right? So there you have it. I think the last two modules of the course are actually the most fun, and it's where some of the greatest and deepest learning occurs. It's hands-on mostly. The assessment is framed on your hands-on experience. You don't want to wait till the last minute to perform these tasks. You want to be able to take your time. You want to go by the rubric. If you rush or you wait to the last minute, you'll find the assessments a lot harder because the assessment is based on what you're doing with your hands. Any questions before we clear today? Last opportunity. Okay, I'm going to stop recording.